What's up, everybody? Welcome into Dodger Heads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jess Beagle, joined today by a special guest, Joe Mock, the founder of BaseballParks.com, has a great article up comparing Dodger Stadium and Yankee Stadium. So we're excited to chat with you, Joe. Thank you for joining us. I joked right before we came on, for a guy who studies and thinks a lot about stadiums, I know it's new Yankee Stadium, but Dodgers Yankees is a meaningful one for folks like you, I imagine.
Well, yes. And that article that you mentioned on baseballparks.com, I posted it yesterday morning, comparing, as I do every fall, I compared the two ballparks in the World Series on a number of factors. And so I think this is my 23rd year doing that. Well, in the 24 hours since I posted that, I've had 10 times as much interest and reposting and comments and everything. This is a World Series that not just the country is watching, the world is watching, and people are very, very interested in this matchup of the teams. And I'm of course, interested in the matchup of the ballparks.
Yeah, well, I want to get to that in a second, but I just have to ask, how does somebody found a website since in 1997 that is strictly focused on baseball stadiums? Like, walk me through sort of the genesis of that idea, and then, you're 27 years now of running this thing.
Very fair question. Ever since I was a little kid, I have enjoyed taking pictures of, back when there was camera and film and that kind of thing, taking pictures of sports facilities. And I would always, if my family was going on vacation, I was the one who mapped out the route to get to the beach because I wanted to take pictures of this stadium and that ballpark and that kind of thing. So over the decades, I built up an enormous catalog of digital pictures of baseball parks. And so when the World Wide Web happened in mid 1997, I remember it vividly. I thought, well, maybe this World Wide Web thing that's coming out would be a great place for me to display all these ballpark photos I have. I guess you need to buy a domain name. So I looked up ballparks.com. Nope, that was already taken. And I could see in the registry, which cost $70 for 2 years back then, I could see in the registry that name.com after name.com were being just gobbled up. Yeah. So I checked baseballparks.com. Maybe that'll be available, and it was. So I owned a domain name then and had to figure out how you get content up on it. No one really knew at that point because it was brand new. And I learned a lot of ways of how not to do it. And after a couple of months, I kind of settled into a format. We've updated that and updated the technology and everything over the years. But what began as what I thought would be an online photo album where I could show pictures of ballparks, it hit me really quickly that baseball fans love content about ballparks. Yeah. Way more than other sports fans and tennis aficionados or football fans or whatever. Baseball fans really love the parks where their favorite team plays, and they love how it is different than other parks, because that's a difference between this and other sports, is that you can have kind of a different set of rules from one ballpark to another about how far you have to hit it to have a home run or a ground rule double or whatever. So that grew into a book that I wrote. I used to do contests and probably the most enduring thing from the early days of baseballparks.com is that every time a new pro ballpark opened on any level, majors, minors, didn't matter, I would go there, I would review it. And if you go to baseballparks.com and up at the top on the homepage, there's a place where you can select in-depth reviews. And you'll see 100 of these in-depth reviews that I've done of all the pro ballparks that have either been built or torn down and rebuilt or whatever since I started Baseball Parks back in 97. So I did one on, new Yankee Stadium in 2009 when it opened. I was able to knock that out on the same trip as seeing Citi Field, since they opened, like a week and a half apart. So, and they have the same architecture firm, which is amazing to me. But I found really quickly that baseball fans just love this stuff. And here I am all these years later, and I'm still, creating content and everything for baseballparks.com. But I don't know that I've ever had anything that has resonated and caused as much interest and feedback and retweeting and all these things as World Series comparison that I released yesterday. Again, I've been doing this for over 2 decades with these comparisons every fall. They don't really make a ripple, but people are really into it this year.
I love it. I love it. Well, you mentioned, I mean, the uniqueness of baseball stadiums. As somebody who watches a lot of sports, football, soccer, there are it's interesting to learn about some of these sports, like even soccer. There are slight variations on the dimensions of a field, but most people don't even know whether the field they're watching is slightly wider or more narrow. Football
There's
fields,
no
they can
dimensions
adjust
marked on a wall or anything telling you that.
Totally. Or the crown
baseball,
in
they
the
trumpet it
field.
for everyone to know.
Exactly. And here in Dodgers Yankees, what's funny is in Dodger Stadium, the symmetrical stadium is the most unique, right? I believe it's the only symmetrical stadium that is left. And then you've got Yankee Stadium that is one of the most famous, I would say, outside of Fenway Park. In my mind, the right field corner of Yankee Stadium is like the second most iconic element that exists, the short porch, if you will. So for somebody like yourself, you've got the unique in that Dodger Stadium is perfectly symmetrical, the only one, and Yankee Stadium, again, outside of the Green Monster.
And which is a newer ballpark also, interestingly.
Right. Yeah. So you've got kind of two features in these two stadiums that make them unique among the unique sport that baseball really is.
True. And you've got the two teams with the highest attendance this year. You've got 2 of the top 3 payroll teams here in the World Series. There's just so much that is right and interesting about this. So my little contribution to this is, well, how did the 2 ballparks compare? And I really had a lot of fun doing that. I hadn't done one on Yankee Stadium since the last time they were in 2009. Been a few years since I've done it for Dodger Stadium too, because I update it every year, even if it's a team that's been to 2 of the last 5 World Series or something like that. And I really did, I have to admit, Jeff, I had a great time going to the Dodgers World Series winning series because it was in the bubble in Arlington, Texas, with the roof closed. And I live in Texas, so I was able to go see. I was able to follow the Dodgers through all the rounds of the playoffs and winning the World Series. So I had a lot of fun with that and didn't have to travel all that far.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I loved one of the stats you gave right at the top was the Dodgers and Yankees have obviously met. I believe you said this is the 12th time, but this is the first time that these two stadiums, because you've got 7 times where it was the Brooklyn Dodgers versus the New York Yankees. You have 4 times where it was old Yankee Stadium and current Dodger Stadium. This is the first time of new Yankee Stadium versus Dodger Stadium, which I thought was an interesting factoid. One thing, though, in your tail of the tape, which I would encourage people to go check out at baseballparks.com, you share your own personal ranking of these venues. You've got Dodger fans will be happy to know that Dodger Stadium is ranked ahead of new Yankee Stadium. By a lot. There are going to be some Dodgers fans that may think 7th for the Dodgers is too low. Although some people I know that have gone to some, if you like newer ballparks, Dodger Stadium is not necessarily going to check the amenities box that some people are after. But give me,
you may think so, except the Dodgers ownership has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the last decade or so improving things, including that outfield area that opened a couple of years ago, designed by Janet Marie Smith, who I'm a huge fan of her work in urban planning and sports architecture and everything. So even though it's not a new ballpark, it feels new when you go there.
Yeah. As somebody from the outside that comes into a place like Dodger Stadium, I'm curious for you, what are the things that stand out to you, either as the most positive, memorable thing that they have, or maybe even the thing that you wish was most different?
I would be hard pressed to come up with something that I think should be different at Dodger Stadium. I can think of several things about Yankee Stadium, hence my much lower ranking.
Yeah, I believe you have Dodger Stadium 7th on your list and Yankee Stadium 19th. Does that sound right?
Yes, but I actually provide 2 different rankings. I have my own personal one that's on my baseballparks.com website, but for years, I've freelanced regarding baseball parks and sports facilities for USA Today. And so the editors back in spring training of this year approached me like, hey, counting me, there's 8 people who write or edit about baseball who work for USA Today, let's have all of them rank 1 to 30 the major league parks, and then we'll kind of, compile this and come up with the USA Today staff has this ranking. So the USA Today staff, which includes me, but I only had 1 vote out of 8, has Dodger Stadium at 7th. And that, I don't think that is a bad place to be. In my own personal writing, my personal ranking, I have it 11th. And I even put a little blurb in my comparison that I posted saying that's probably a little on the low side. My problem is I look at the 10 parks I have ahead of them in the rankings, and I'd be hard pressed to say, okay, I'll remove this one and move it down and move Dodger Stadium up. I kind of have grown into these rankings because, if I'm going to run a website called baseballparks.com, I need to be in the ballparks.
Yeah.
And so I cycle through this. This was Yankee Stadium year for me, as well as some others. Dodger Stadium, I did that a couple of years ago, but I don't mind going to Dodger Stadium sooner than my normal recycling of my itinerary goes, because it is such an enjoyable place to go to. And to, Jeff, to your question about what do I particularly like about it, I love the upper deck. I love that area in the infield and the view you have down onto the field and out to the mountains and everything when it's moderately clear day.
Yeah.
I love that about it. And I love that it kind of has the 60s vibe to it, because it opened in 1962. Yes, I was alive then, but I wasn't there for the grand opening. It kind of has that 60s vibe still to it, but they've gone to tremendous lengths in modernizing the amenities there. If you go back to when the current ownership group bought the Dodgers, which also meant buying Dodger Stadium, they immediately spent $100 million in that offseason just widening concourses, allowing all the concession stands to actually do food prep at the stand instead of boiling Dodger dogs down in the basement and putting them in carts and rolling them up to the upper. No, they're actually now doing food prep at all of those concession stands. So it's not that kind of change isn't going to make a fan who hadn't been there since they made the changes really go, wow, this place is really different.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that impact on you. I think it has an impact on you that this is a really nicer game day experience. I get higher quality food at the concession stands. It's easier getting through the gates than it used to be. The size of the merchandise stores and how plentiful they are around the ballpark, and the variety of food, because it's not too many generations ago that the Dodgers kind of had the attitude, okay, when people come to a game, they want to watch Dodger baseball and eat a Dodger dog, and we don't really need to offer them anything other than that. So it's been only in the last few, and that sufficed. Fans didn't mutiny either. They were fine about that. They also, kind of acted like the outside world didn't exist, because back in the old days, they didn't even provide out-of-town scores. They wanted you focusing on the Dodgers on the field. But now when you go to a game there, it is such a nicer game day experience than it used to be. And that's whether you're out in the pavilion seats, you've got, in suites, you're in the upper level, upper seating deck. No matter where you are, it's a much nicer experience. And so that is a ballpark I love to visit.
Yeah. Well, and I love that, to your point, it still feels, there's still the nostalgia. Like there's some, like, I know people will look at like San Diego Stadium or San Francisco Stadium, or, some of these, which I guess San Francisco is not newer anymore, but like some of these stadiums that are state of the art. And it's like, yes, but there's no sense of history. Like when you go to Dodger Stadium, it still feels like you get the positives of a ballpark that's 62 years old, as well as the amenities, maybe some of the amenities of a newer one. One question for you before we go real quick, because I know we've got some folks that are watching our channel that are going to be headed to New York. So people that are going to Yankee Stadium, maybe for the first time, new Yankee Stadium. Ironically enough, I have been to new Yankee Stadium and never got a chance to go to old Yankee Stadium. I might have been, it was somewhere in the first couple of years that it opened. But from your perspective, what are the things that somebody walking into Yankee Stadium for the first time should know as far as maybe do's or don'ts?
Well, first of all, if it's your first trip to New York to see the Yankees, be very thankful that you are going to the Yankee Stadium of today rather than the one they were playing in prior to 2009. And, you know, the interesting thing about Yankee Stadium, I touch on this in that comparison on baseballparks.com. A lot of people don't realize this, but in the mid 70s, the Yankees actually left Yankee Stadium, played 2 seasons over at Shea Stadium, while Yankee Stadium was bulldozed basically to the ground and rebuilt. Okay, then they moved back, and then that was across the street from where the current Yankee Stadium is. The interesting thing about all of this is that from 1923, when the house that Ruth built opened, till today, the Yankees have called where they play Yankee Stadium. So this is in a way, in my way of thinking, this is Yankee Stadium 3.
Yeah.
And the things that jump out at me that are definitely superior versus, let's call it Yankee Stadium 2, that closed in 2008, the width of the concourses. I mean, you could park several 18-wheelers side by side in the concourses, whereas in old Yankee Stadium, I mean, if it was between innings or after a game or something, I mean, the concourses were so narrow, it was really hard getting in and out. And that doesn't, you know, things like that don't help your game day experience that much. It's just a much more comfortable place. My gripe about Yankee Stadium, and the reason that I rank it, you know, 8, 9, 10 spots below Dodger Stadium, is that as they were designing it, they kind of forgot that baseball is supposed to be fun. And it's interesting that I mentioned a few minutes ago that the same architecture firm called HOK at the time, now called Populous. And by the way, I only have 2 kinds of friends in the world: sports architects and broadcasters. I don't know anybody else, it seems. Okay, but when they were designing back in 2007, 2008, they were designing Citi Field and Yankee Stadium on different floors of the building. They promised the 2 teams there would be no riffraff of going back and forth. And no, they each had their teams, and they were not allowed to look at each other's work. But if you go to Citi Field, there was a little part of me that wanted them to play, you know, the Mets to play in the World Series. But if you go to Citi Field, it's fun. Okay, there's the Shake Shack out in center field. There's games for kids. There is wonderful wild food everywhere. Very interesting, very accessible things to see there. Yankee Stadium isn't that way.
Got it.
You know, I mean, they spent $2.3 billion building a monument to the New York Yankees. That's what you feel like when you go there.
Yeah.
You feel like almost like you're going to a cathedral. In a way you are, I guess, but given the history of the Yankees and everything. But you're not going to a fun sporting event. You're there to revere and cheer for the Yankees. Don't worry about those pesky things like, you know, food variety and those kinds of things. You know, you're there to focus on the Yankees, and everything else kind of takes a back seat. I don't feel that way at all at Dodger Stadium. I love the variety of the concessions. I love the bobblehead, you know, the really huge bobbleheads and baseballs and all that kind of thing that they have scattered around, because they really embrace Dodger history in a way that the Yankees don't.
Yeah.
The Yankees treat their history, and of course, all those World Series championships, 27, the number 27 is everywhere in that stadium because they won 27 World Series, but they don't really display that in a fun way. It's done in a very reverential way, which if I was, you know, in elementary school or something and my family were Yankee fans, I don't know that I'd really be looking forward to going to Yankee games the way I would if I was going to Dodger Stadium or Citi Field or San Diego's Petco Park or any of those, because it's just not as much of a fun place. And the interesting thing is I'm not the only one who thinks that, because again, the board, the committee of 8 of us baseball writers and editors for USA Today both ranked Yankee Stadium down. I had 19. The group as a whole made it number 20.
Yeah.
For a team that has spent that much money, that's got to be disappointing to them. But I don't think they lose sleep about that because, they have a money-making machine there. The ticket prices, everything is ridiculously expensive. I will say this for maybe Dodger fans going to a Yankee game during this series. Driving, if you fly there and rent a car and you're going to drive to the ballpark and you're kind of expecting a sea of parking lots surrounding it like Dodger Stadium, no. Only a couple of parking garages, almost entirely filled with season ticket holders. If you can get in there, it's $50 plus. I mean, it's not a very accessible park from that standpoint. When I went there for 2 games in July, because I was updating things, when I went to New York, I didn't even rent a car. I did everything by mass transit and Uber and that kind of thing, because a car would have been an inconvenience instead of a convenience to have. There's the different subway lines that all meet at 161st Street, which is where Yankee Stadium is. So mass transit will get you there and that kind of thing. Just don't think too hard about driving, because that's not going to be an easy path for you to take.
Yeah, I love the way you describe how Yankee Stadium came out, because I think every stereotype I have of the Yankees and how awesome they think they are, like how highly they think of themselves, they built a ballpark that absolutely reflects the stereotype that they're like, why would anybody want anything else? And again, I think there's something cool to when I went to new Yankee Stadium, there is a sense where you feel like, I know this stadium is new, but they replicated many of the things of old Yankee Stadium, which makes it feel like you're going to a historic ballpark. But at the same time, it is funny. Like, I can imagine the Yankees being like, well, why would anybody come here other than to worship us as the New York Yankees and how amazing we are and how historic our franchise is and how many great, and part of them is not wrong, but it's just funny. Whereas, the Mets, I think of like, hey, let's make sure people have fun when they come to this game,
Well, if I were a cartoonist, like on the editorial page of newspapers, I would draw a cartoon that shows fans lined up to get into Yankee Stadium, and there being a mandatory tattoo parlor as you come in where they tattoo 27 on you. Yeah. Okay. They really kind of require devotion to the Yankees when you're there. I'll take that a step further because, I look at ballparks differently than a lot of fans would, in that, I begin and end my day in the press box because I have media credentials and all that kind of thing. But I go and look at everything. Not, the media credentials allow me to go and look everywhere. But I will say this: every time I go to cover anything at Dodger Stadium, I am treated wonderfully. I'm treated like royalty. They treat everyone very well there. I get access to do all of the, the quotes I need and that kind of thing for articles. You go to Yankee Stadium, even if you're representing USA Today, like I was when I was there in July, they don't lift a finger to help you.
You're lucky to be there, Joe. It's your privilege to just have walked inside the stadium.
Jeff, you put it perfectly. That is an excellent observation. That's kind of how it is there. And the amazing thing is, it's just a few miles away from Citi Field, which is a blast to go to. I can't wait to go to games when I'm in New York at Citi Field. It is so much more fun. The atmosphere is so much more joyous, happy, kid-friendly. And, I may not ever be invited back to get media credentials at Yankee Stadium for the things I'm saying, but I'm just trying to relay to baseball fans. Don't go to a game at Yankee Stadium and expect it to be an atmosphere like you've seen at Dodger Stadium or Citi Field or a bunch of the other, modern day ballparks.
Totally. Well, hey, Joe, we appreciate your time. It's fun to read this stuff. I would encourage people, check out Baseball Parks. I'm even looking, there's a cool poster if you're into posters with all the different stadiums on there. So what else do you want to point people to, Joe, outside of just baseballparks.com?
Oh, and I appreciate that. A lot of the content I push out does happen through X, formerly Twitter. And I have an appropriate handle at Twitter. It's at Baseball Parks. So please follow me there. You get like daily thoughts on things happening in the ballpark world. And occasionally I'll throw in something about, games that are going on and that kind of thing. But and no one, because of that, no one really bugs me. Like, who's going to win in how many games in this series? Like, I don't know. I kind of, because I feel a certain kinship to the Dodgers front office and Dodger Stadium and everything. I guess that's who I'm rooting for. It's easy.
There we go.
It's easier to root against the Yankees than it is to root against Ohtani, Freeman, and all those guys that are on the Dodgers. So that's probably where I'm leaning. But at Baseball Parks on Twitter is every time I have new content, I posted a link to it there, or a new article in USA Today. Like this week, I have an article on the new Intuit Dome that the Clippers just opened the other night. And so, that's in USA Today Sports Weekly this week. So I love covering all types of sports facilities, but my first love is baseball, obviously.
I love it. I love it. Well, that is Joe Mock, again, founder of baseballparks.com. Go ahead and check him out. Everybody else, thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you stay tuned here. If you're new, subscribe, ring the notification bell, live content after every single World Series game. So this should be a fun one. So thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. And as always, go Dodgers.